Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. Alina used to believe in fairy tales. She used to believe in love that lasted, in promises that held weight, in a marriage that would stand the test of time. She had spent her entire life dreaming of the kind of love that could weather any storm. And for a while, she thought she had found it. When she married Daniel 6 years ago, she was convinced she was walking into a lifetime of happiness. He was everything she had ever wanted: intelligent, ambitious, respected, the kind of man people looked up to, the kind of man women admired. And for a while, he had been the kind of man who made her feel like the most important person in the world. But fairy tales don't last, and love, as she would come to learn, is far more fragile than anyone ever admits. Somewhere along the way, the warmth had turned to ice. The passion had faded into silence. Their home had become a house filled with empty conversations and unspoken resentment. Daniel had become a stranger. He spent long hours at work, coming home late, exhausted, barely glancing in her direction before disappearing into his office or straight to bed. He was always too tired, always too busy, always somewhere else, even when he was right in front of her. At first, she fought for them. She tried to remind him of what they used to be. She planned surprise dinners. She left sweet notes in his briefcase. She wore the perfume he once told her made his heart race. But Daniel never noticed. Or worse, he noticed and didn't care. The loneliness was suffocating. She stopped trying after a while. She stopped waiting for him to come home early, stopped hoping he would reach for her in bed, stopped believing he would look at her the way he used to. And slowly, something inside her began to break. Then came the high school reunion. It was supposed to be a night of nostalgia, a night of catching up with old friends, of laughter and harmless memories. Just one night where she could forget about how hollow her marriage had become. She hadn't even planned to go at first. But when Elena, her closest friend from high school, walked into her store one afternoon and mentioned it, something in Alina shifted. "You should come," Elena said, her eyes lighting up. "It's been years, Alina. It'll be good for you." And maybe, for the first time in months, she wanted to do something just for herself. So she went. She walked into that venue expecting nothing but an evening of small talk and polite smiles. She never expected to see him. Adrian, her first love. The one who had made her believe in soulmates when she was 17. The one who had known every single dream she ever had. Who had held her hand through heartbreaks and triumphs. The one who had been ripped from her life too soon when his family moved away. And just like that, 1,000 memories came rushing back. For a moment, time didn't exist. The noise around her faded. She saw only him. He looked different, older, sharper, with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. But his eyes were the same. And the way he smiled at her, the way his entire face lit up, it was like nothing had changed. They fell into conversation easily, as if the years hadn't passed at all. They laughed about high school, about the ridiculous things they used to do, about how they used to sneak onto the school roof at night just to watch the stars, about how they had once promised each other that no matter where life took them, they would always find their way back to each other. And for the first time in years, Alina felt seen. She felt like someone was actually looking at her, listening, caring. And then, she felt something else. Something she had buried so deep inside her that she had almost forgotten it existed. Desire. It wasn't just the way Adrian looked at her. It was the way he made her feel. The way he leaned in when she spoke. The way he remembered the little things she had long forgotten. The way he made her laugh until her chest ached. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, but she did. And then Daniel walked in. She had almost forgotten he was coming. He arrived late, as usual, his tie slightly loosened, his expression unreadable. He scanned the room, his gaze barely lingering on her before he nodded in polite acknowledgement. He didn't even look surprised to see her there, as if she was just another familiar face in a sea of strangers, as if she wasn't his wife. And suddenly, something inside her snapped. She had spent years trying to get him to see her, to notice her, to want her. And yet here she was, standing right in front of him, and he still couldn't be bothered to care. And in that moment, she made a choice. A reckless, selfish, irreversible choice. She leaned in and kissed Adrian, not out of love, not out of longing, but out of revenge. And that one moment, that one kiss, would set off a chain of destruction she never saw coming. The moment Alina's lips met Adrian's, the world seemed to stop. For a few blissful seconds, she forgot everything. Her broken marriage, the years of loneliness, the suffocating emptiness of her life. She forgot that Daniel was somewhere in the room, forgot that she was making a mistake she could never take back, because, for the first time in years, she felt. But reality has a way of catching up, cruel and unforgiving. A sharp, sudden crash shattered the moment. The sound of glass breaking, the kind of sound that makes a room fall silent. Alina barely had time to pull away before she saw him, Daniel, standing just a few feet away, his hand clenched into a fist, his wine glass shattered at his feet. For the first time in a long time, he was looking at her, really looking at her. And for the first time in a long time, she saw something in his eyes. Not indifference, not exhaustion, but fury. A deep, quiet, seething rage. The kind of rage that can ruin lives. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The room was suspended in shock, waiting for the explosion. And then Daniel moved. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He didn't even lunge for her like she had half expected him to. Instead, he turned to Adrian. And without a word, he grabbed him by the collar and threw the first punch. The sound of Adrian's body hitting the floor sent a collective gasp through the crowd. Someone screamed. Someone else pulled out their phone. And just like that, their private disaster became a public spectacle. Alina's heart slammed against her ribs as she rushed forward, kneeling beside Adrian, whose lip was already split open. Daniel, stop! But Daniel wasn't listening. His fists were clenched at his sides, his breathing heavy, his entire body taut with rage. He didn't even look at her. Instead, his voice cut through the silence, low and venomous. So this is what you do now, Alina? You throw yourself at your ex like a desperate whore? The words sliced through her like a knife. The humiliation was instant. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Alina felt her cheeks burn, her entire body trembling, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. "Oh, don't you dare play the victim, Daniel," she spat, her voice shaking with barely contained fury. "You think I don't know about her?" For the first time, his expression faltered. "What the hell are you talking about?" Alina let out a bitter laugh. "Don't play dumb. The woman you drive to work every morning. The one you take to dinner. The one you've been sneaking around with for months." Silence. And then, to her shock, Daniel let out a humorless chuckle. "You're unbelievable," he muttered, shaking his head. "You create an entire affair in your head, convince yourself I'm cheating, and your response is to go and actually do it yourself? You're disgusting." Alina's nails dug into her palms. "You don't get to stand there and act like you're innocent," she hissed. Daniel exhaled slowly, as if trying to rein in his temper. "That woman," he bit out, "is my business partner. She's married. She has kids. And the only reason I drive her to work is because she's new in town and doesn't have a car yet." The words hit like a punch to the stomach. For a second, Alina couldn't breathe. She had been so sure. She had convinced herself that Daniel was betraying her, that she was right to punish him. But she had been wrong. Horribly, catastrophically wrong. She had just destroyed her marriage over a lie she had told herself. The weight of her mistake came crashing down on her all at once. The murmurs around her grew louder. The crowd had fully tuned in now, watching them like a live reality show. Phones were out, cameras recording. Every second of their destruction was being immortalized. Daniel ran a hand down his face, exhaling harshly. And then, in a voice void of all emotion, he said the words that sealed her fate. "We're done, Alina." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an outburst. It was a fact. A cold, hard truth. Alina's stomach twisted. "Daniel, wait." But he was already walking away. She felt panic rise in her throat. "Daniel, please." He turned to her one last time, his face unreadable. "Don't come home tonight," he said simply. And then he was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Alina stood there, frozen, as the full weight of her actions crushed her. Her marriage was over, and she had no one to blame but herself. The drive home was a blur, except it wasn't home anymore. Daniel's words echoed in Alina's head, cold, final. Don't come home tonight. He had meant it. When she pulled up to the house, her heart stopped. Her clothes, her entire life, were scattered across the front lawn. Dresses she had worn to anniversaries, shoes she had carefully chosen for special occasions, expensive handbags Daniel had gifted her over the years, now lying in the dirt like discarded trash. She barely noticed the neighbors watching, whispering behind their curtains, recording from their porches. Her legs felt weak as she stepped out of the car, approaching the wreckage of what used to be her home. A sharp gust of wind carried the sound of shredding fabric. Alina's breath caught in her throat. Daniel had cut up her clothes, not just thrown them out, destroyed them. As if erasing her from his life wasn't enough, he wanted to ruin her. Her hands trembled as she picked up a torn blouse, one she had worn on their honeymoon. A deep, jagged cut ran through the fabric, slicing it in half. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her body shaking. This was it. There was no going back. She wanted to scream, to beg, to undo everything. Instead, she sank to her knees in the middle of the destruction, staring at the broken pieces of the life she had ruined with her own hands. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. At first, she ignored it, but it wouldn't stop. When she finally pulled it out, her blood ran cold. 108 new messages, 32 missed calls. And then, the final blow. Her name was trending. People were talking about her, laughing at her. She opened one of the messages and felt her stomach twist. A video, shaky, grainy footage from the reunion. Her kiss with Adrian. Daniel's outburst. The glass smashing. His voice, dripping with venom. So this is what you do now, Alina? You throw yourself at your ex like a desperate whore? And then, her own voice, raw with accusation. You think I don't know about her? The woman you've been sneaking around with? And then Daniel's devastating truth. That woman is my business partner. She's married. She has kids. The video cut out. Alina's hands were clammy. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The internet had ripped her apart. She cheated. She destroyed her own marriage. She deserved this. People who didn't even know her had turned her into a joke. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she scrolled through the comments. Wow, what a train wreck. She really thought she could play the victim? Cheating wife gets exactly what she deserves. LMAO. Her husband is a king for throwing her out. Alina's fingers trembled as she locked her phone. Her legs wouldn't move. She was stuck, trapped in the wreckage of her own making. The sound of tires crunching against gravel made her jerk up. A car pulled into the driveway. For a moment, hope surged through her chest. Daniel. Maybe he had changed his mind. Maybe he would forgive her. Maybe. The driver's side door opened. But it wasn't Daniel. It was Adrian. Her stomach dropped. He was furious. She could see it in the tight set of his jaw, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. He walked toward her, his eyes burning with betrayal. You used me, he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut. Alina swallowed hard. You made me think this meant something. His eyes flickered with hurt. But it was never about me, was it? I was just a pawn in your little revenge game. Alina's throat tightened. I didn't mean. Save it. Adrian shook his head, laughing bitterly. You know what's funny? I actually thought we had something. That maybe, just maybe, this meant more to you than just getting back at him. Alina's breath caught. Adrian took a step closer, his voice dropping. And now, because of you, my name is everywhere, he said. My girlfriend saw that video. Alina. She left me. The guilt hit her like a freight train. She hadn't even thought about Adrian's life, his relationships, his reputation. She had been so focused on punishing Daniel, on proving something, that she hadn't stopped to consider the damage she was causing. She had ruined everything, not just for herself, for everyone. Adrian exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I should have known better, he muttered. You're exactly the same as you were in high school. Alina flinched. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she had changed. But had she? Had she really? The silence stretched between them, thick with disappointment. Finally, Adrian turned to leave. Before he got into his car, he spoke one last time. "Don't call me again, Alina." And then, just like Daniel, he was gone. Alina stood there, alone in the cold night air, staring at the mess of her life scattered across the lawn. The humiliation, the shame, the regret, it all crushed her, pressing down until she could barely breathe. She had destroyed her marriage. She had lost Adrian, too. And now, she had nothing left. Alina had nowhere to go. She sat in her car, parked outside what used to be her home, staring at the darkness beyond the windshield. The air was thick with the weight of everything she had lost. Her marriage, her reputation, her dignity. The messages on her phone kept coming. Friends, acquaintances, strangers. Everyone had something to say. Some mocked her. Some pitied her. Most just watched the spectacle unfold like it was entertainment. Her own life had become a public disaster. A deep exhaustion settled into her bones. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't go to Adrian. He had made that clear. She couldn't go to Elena. Her friend was engaged now, with a life too full to take in someone as broken as her. And Daniel, he had shut her out completely. Her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. But when she saw the name flashing on the screen, her stomach twisted. Daniel. For a moment, hope flared. Maybe he had calmed down. Maybe he would give her a chance to explain. Maybe. She answered. "Daniel, His voice was ice. "I'm sending movers tomorrow. Whatever's left of your things will be packed up. Don't come back to the house." Alina's throat tightened. "Daniel, please." "No, Alina." His voice was steel. "I don't want to hear it. I don't care what excuses you have. You threw everything away." "I made a mistake," she whispered. He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "A mistake?" "No, Alina. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. Leaving the stove on is a mistake. You made a choice." Silence. Alina clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. And then, in the final, crushing blow, he added, "I loved you once. But now, when I look at you, I feel nothing." The line went dead. Alina stared at her phone, her vision blurring. It was over. Truly, completely over. The cold reality settled in. She was alone, and there was no one left to save her. Days passed in a haze. Alina moved into a cheap motel, the only place she could afford after Daniel froze their joint accounts. Her store, her one piece of independence, had been raided. Daniel had wiped out her inventory, legally reclaiming what he had helped her fund. She had nothing. She barely left the motel room, ashamed to show her face. The world outside was still talking about her. Every time she picked up her phone, there were more notifications, more gossip, more reminders of her downfall. No one wanted to listen to her side of the story. Not that it mattered anymore. The loneliness clawed at her, suffocating and relentless. She had never felt more isolated in her life. One evening, out of sheer desperation, she called Elena. "Alina, I can't," her old friend said, exhaustion in her voice. "I love you, but I can't be dragged into this mess. My fiancé doesn't even want me speaking to you." Alina swallowed hard. "Elena, I don't know where to go." A long pause. Then, quietly, "I'm sorry." The call disconnected. That was it. Her last tie to her old life gone. Alina sat in the silence of the motel room, staring at the peeling wallpaper. This wasn't supposed to be her life. She was supposed to have a husband who adored her, a business she built, a future full of love and warmth. Instead, she had destroyed everything with her own hands. And now, she had no one left to blame but herself. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to lose. And some losses, she knew, were permanent.